All right, let's talk about Greenland. And I want you to forget everything you think you know about it being just some remote, icy island. Because right now, it's become the absolute epicenter of a brewing storm. We're talking about a geopolitical fault line that could, and this is no exaggeration, literally fracture the entire Western alliance. So that brings us to the big question, right? Could one NATO ally really threaten to annex another one? I mean, it sounds like something straight out of a political thriller, but believe it or not, this is a real scenario Western leaders are grappling with right now. So, how on earth did we get here? Well, a big part of the answer is in this quote. This is where you can see a really dramatic shift in the language being used. What started back in 2019 as this kind of absurd offer to buy Greenland, well, that's been completely reframed. Now the U.S. is calling its position a national security necessity. That's not just talk. That phrase, necessity, is an absolute game changer. Okay, so why? Why this sudden, intense focus on Greenland? What makes this one island so incredibly valuable that it would be worth risking a crisis of this magnitude? Well, the answer is a perfect storm of resources, geography, and our changing climate. You can really boil Greenland's value down to three key things. First up, critical minerals. We're talking about the stuff that's essential for everything from your phone to advanced fighter jets. Second, as all that ice melts, brand new shipping routes are opening up across the Arctic, and Greenland is basically the gatekeeper. And third, and this is a big one, its location is the absolute linchpin for the missile defense systems that protect all of North America. And when we talk about these mineral deposits, the sheer scale is just mind-boggling. We're talking an estimated 1.5 million metric tons of rare earth elements locked away under Greenland's ice. That is a treasure trove big enough to completely reshape global supply chains as we know them. And this chart right here, this shows you exactly why the U.S. is so laser-focused on those minerals. Look at China's overwhelming dominance in refining them. For Washington, getting a source that isn't dependent on Beijing, well, it isn't just about economics. It's that national security necessity we were just talking about. It all clicks into place. So, yeah, the U.S. motivation is crystal clear, but this aggressive stance has triggered a really powerful and, frankly, unified backlash from America's oldest allies. They're basically building a diplomatic wall of resistance. Canada's position is rock solid, and it's perfectly captured in this statement from the Prime Minister. And you have to understand, this isn't just about them defending a fellow ally. For Ottawa, this is about defending the core principle of sovereignty itself. The unspoken fear is, hey, if Greenland is vulnerable, could Canada's own Arctic territory be next? And look, this isn't just tough talk. Canada is making some very real, concrete diplomatic moves. They're opening a brand new consulate right in Greenland's capital to build direct relationships. They sent their Governor General, who is herself of Inuk descent, which is a hugely powerful symbolic gesture. And they've joined a European-led coalition to protect the sovereignty of all NATO members. They're not messing around. Okay, now let's hop across the Atlantic. The Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen does not mince words. This would be the end of NATO. For Denmark, and really for most of Europe, this isn't just some dispute. This is a full-blown existential threat to the most successful military alliance in modern history. And the European response is what you might call a classic two-pronged strategy. On one hand, you've got the EU wielding its massive economic power, threatening to freeze a major trade deal with the US. Ouch. On the other hand, national leaders are raising the ultimate security shield, threatening to invoke NATO's collective defense clause against a fellow member. That is a truly unthinkable, almost paradoxical scenario. And you know who's at the forefront of this resistance? French President Emmanuel Macron. He's framing this whole crisis as a pivotal moment, a wake-up call, as he puts it, for Europe to finally develop what he calls strategic autonomy. In other words, the ability to defend its own interests without having to rely on an unpredictable ally. And that brings us right to the heart of the institutional crisis. Because this isn't just a political disagreement anymore. The U.S. position strikes at the very legal and, frankly, at the philosophical foundation of the entire NATO alliance. So to really get the gravity of this, you have to understand Article 5. It is the absolute heart of NATO. The core principle is simple. An attack on one member is an attack on all. It's the promise that has kept the peace in Europe for over 70 years. It was even invoked for the U.S. after 9/11. It is the ultimate security guarantee. And that brings us to the alliance-breaking paradox. It's pretty straightforward. Greenland is Danish territory, which means it's NATO territory.
So any hostile move by the US would technically force allies like Canada, France, and Germany to defend Denmark against the United States. The alliance simply could not survive that kind of internal contradiction. It would collapse.
With all this talk about great power maneuvering, it's pretty easy to forget about the 57,000 people who are right at the center of this storm. But as it turns out, their voice is proving to be the most decisive one of all.
I mean, just look at this. The numbers really do speak for themselves. A staggering 85% of Greenlanders are against the idea of joining the United States. This isn't a divided population. This is a near universal, resounding no.
And that feeling is echoed right from the very top of Greenland's government. This quote from the Prime Minister is just so clear and powerful. It's a fundamental assertion of their self-determination and their national pride. The message is simple. We are a people with our own future, not a piece of property to be bought and sold.
But like with anything this big, the situation is a little more complex than it first appears. Check out this quote from an Independence Party leader. It reveals a really surprising perspective. While they also reject annexation, some independence advocates actually see the U.S. interest as potential leverage, a tool they could maybe use to finally break away from Danish oversight. It just adds another fascinating layer to this whole debate.
And so, at the end of the day, we're left with this final critical question. The crisis over Greenland, it's about so much more than just one island. It's really a test case for the future. As climate change literally redraws the physical map of the world, we have to ask ourselves, will the political and legal maps, the rules of international order that have kept a peace for decades, melt right along with